All right. So we will call to order the meeting of the Youth Mentoring Request for Application Evaluation Team. It's Friday, June 2nd, and we will call the meeting to order at 2:06 p.m. Ms. Clay, will you please call the roll?
Taylor Bureau here. Robbie Simpson here. Jacqueline Steele. Adrian Stevenson here. Sandra Ward and Lori Gert.
We have a quorum, so we will move forward. If I could get one of our evaluation team members to provide a motion to approve the agenda.
Do a motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you. Thank you. And by consensus, our agenda is approved. Ms. Clay, do we have any public comment?
There's no public comment.
Okay, we have none. And so with that, thank you so much for coming and for participating as an evaluator for our RFA for Youth Mentoring Programs. I will now turn it over to our procurement manager, Holly McNeil.
Hi, everyone. Thank you again for being here. I'm going to walk you through the materials that you have before you, as well as some of the procedural questions for what we hope to accomplish today. Then we will kind of open it for questions and answers before we actually dive into reviewing all of the proposals. So the first thing, you should have this pretty colored document that has the green and the yellow investment panels, that like all of the open procurements, who applied for what, how much they asked for, all of that. Earlier today, we hosted our family strengthening panel, which had two service lines, one for research supported and one for grassroots. We promised them that we would tell you the outcome of their recommendation. So I will go over that now. If you just want to put like a little star next to them, so you know what what is being recommended for funding from the family strengthening team. While you get out a pen, I'll just kind of walk through the difference between their process versus the process you'll undergo. As you will maybe recall during our training, your panel was for an RFA, which is a request for applications, which means you were providing that quantitative kind of qualitative review, and then we'll give your scores to the council, and then the council will just make a decision of, we're going to fund up to this. For the request for proposals, it being kind of a mix of, we want to fund some research-based, we want to fund some grassroots. With that proposal, kind of a consideration of needs, that panel was asked to not only settle on the scores, but then to actually come to a recommendation that's going to be submitted to the council. So the entities chosen for recommendation of award are Application 2, Carter's Corner Community Services, which is for their 24/7 DADS program. Application number 3, Legal Services of North Florida for their free legal service program. Application number 8, the Oasis Center for Women and Girls for their counseling program. Application 9, the Oasis Center for Women and Girls, their Girls Circle program. In the grassroots categories, it was application number 4, PACE Center for Girls. Application number 12, Divine Healthcare Consulting, doing business as SG Mental Health Counseling. And application number 13, the Making Miracles Through Home. So those were the ones that were selected. We shared that with you because some of the applicants noted here with 1 star actually applied for multiple service lines, and some of them crossed over one to the other. So there is, I'll just point out that one of the applicants in your group that you reviewed also applied, but was not selected for funding. The second thing I'll point out is the double star, which means that they're currently receiving funds from CSC for youth development and summer learning programs. So that's what all of the double stars that you'll see, including 3 of the ones that are in the category that you're reviewing. The second items that you'll have before you is this big, I'm gonna call it the big document. This big document that shows all of your scores across I did resend a second one late last night after I discovered that I had a copy and paste error for one of the columns. Thank you for pointing that out, that it was incorrect. So this is the revised one. The items in yellow represent where we had our alternate step in because one of our review team members recused themselves as they had a family member participating in a particular program. So they recused themselves and we called in our alternate. And who is not with us today, but she did submit her scores. But you'll see on here kind of the average scores across for each of them, as well as a total score at the end and an average or composite score, as if, you know, a grade scale, perhaps, if you wanted to review it that way. Our process today will be to go through all of the 9 applications, discuss the merits of each one of them, and give each of you the opportunity to discuss why you scored a certain way or not, and then have the opportunity to change that score should you desire. In front of you, you'll also have your individual score sheet. It's the one that has your name down at the bottom after it goes through all the comments. That is what fed the creation of this draft document. And we will ask that before you leave today, you finalize that document, meaning whatever comments are on that document will stay in the public record. If you change a score, we'll actually ask you on that piece of paper you have to cross something out, change the score and initial it. At the very end of today's proceeding, we'll ask you to sign that and turn it back in so that we can make it final. I will note that if you made comments on yours, what's printed for you is exactly as I received it. I did when I compiled them, let spell check do its thing, so that if there were some typos or errors that way, I did correct those. So just know that it might not be verbatim what you gave me to what made it in here. I didn't change any grammar, just typos, because spell check's my friend. If you have things that you want to reword, change, if you have additional comments that you want to be included as this list eventually goes up to the council, then we ask that you provide those today in writing before you leave so that you are able to close that process. So what we will walk away with today is on our screen. I will come over here and just share our screen real quick. What we will walk away today and publish for the public is an updated version of our score sheet, which I'll broadcast for everyone that's listening, as well as everyone who's here in the audience. They can access a copy of this as well, but we will finalize this score sheet and this will become a part of the record with all the comments below, and that will be what is passed up to the council. Any questions on the procedures of what we hope to accomplish? Okay, well, with that, we will start. As we go through this, everyone will be given the opportunity to talk about each of the applicants. You don't have to make a comment if you don't want to make a comment. That's perfectly fine. You can in fact sit here for the entire next 45 minutes as we go through this and not say a word if that is your desire, or you can speak on every single application. You are welcome to do any and all of the above. So with that, we're going to take up tab 15, which is the application from Big Brothers Big Sisters. You will see going across that they scored 418 points for an average score of an 83.6. Again, just want to point out that the yellows were what was inserted from our alternate instead of one of our team members who did recuse themselves. I will also, just for the record, reflect that that individual is also not present for the discussion of this particular application. She will be joining us at of that, or when she arrives. And if she does arrive early, she will not participate in the discussion of tab 15. So with that, they scored an average of 11 for their organizational profile, 34 on program design, 17 on program evidence, and a 22 on their budget. At this point, I would like to open it up for a discussion about Big Brothers Big Sisters.
It looks like we were pretty similar on each. We all have pretty close to each other. So I don't really have any other comments other than I agree with the average. I think that's pretty consistent.
Yeah, I concur.
Given that discussion, any desire to change any scores for tab 15?
I don't know that I have a desire to change the score, but I do have a question.
Sure.
And it's related to the logic model. What I saw was two different templates that were provided in the review materials. One of them is shorter than the other. One appears to be kind of like a template that most of the applications use. And so my question is there one preferred over the other, one required? I just need to know that because I took that into account with my review.
Sure. So we did require that a logic model be submitted. We opened up and made available training to every single applicant with it if they actually followed through and did apply or did not apply. It was available to anyone and everyone. They did provide a template. So you might see consistency across lots of applicants because if they just used what was provided by our designated trainer, that could reflect that. But it was not, that template was not required. Okay. But just that a logic model, which is a graphical representation of showing your inputs and your activities to lead to your outputs as well as your short, midterm, and long-term outcomes.
Okay, and that's good to know because there were two documents provided in the documents that two templates provided in the documents that I reviewed. One of them had indicators, data source, and data collection method for one of the sections, whereas the other one did not. And so that information was quite helpful in the review process. And so I needed to know if it was required or not. You answered that question.
Perfect. And I would also share some of the applicants who already had developed logic models did ask the question, is the one from training required? And while we answered no, I'm assuming that others might have had that question and maybe just assumed the answer yes instead of asking. And so it was not turned away if they submitted maybe this is the one that we use, but here's the template that they used in training, and we're going to give you both so that we're not disqualified.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Any other discussion on Big Brothers Big Sisters? And no changes of scores. Okay, we will make their score 418 final. And now we will take up tab 16, the Boys and Girls Club. They scored a total of 459 for an average score of a 91.8. They had a 14 on their organizational profile, 38 for program design, 18 on program evidence, and a 22 for budget. We'll now open the floor for discussion on Boys and Girls Club. Like I said, you don't have to make comments, but it's certainly, yep, all right.
And we've noted all of the comments that were connected to.
I usually try to read body language before I advance to the next one.
Yes, one second.
That's what I thought, okay.
The Big Brothers Big Sisters went by too fast for me. I thought that we were like organizational profile, but you all actually were looking all the way across. So give me one second.
Oh, yes, so sorry. And we can go back to Big Brothers Big Sisters if needed.
So for program evidence for Big Brothers Big Sisters, I think I see the scores across for that one and would like to, if possible, hear from my colleagues to understand, again, because I'm wanting to learn how everyone is looking at everything. Would either of you be willing to share how you came to your score for program evidence for Big Brothers Big Sisters?
So we're going back
Or we
to.
go
Big Brothers
backwards,
Big
if you
Sisters.
don't mind.
So we're gonna go take
Yeah,
it
that's fine.
for the purposes of the record, anyone listening, we're gonna go back to tab 15, Big Brothers Big Sisters. The question on the table is to discuss how you came to the conclusion of your score for program evidence.
This one, it really came down to if they had a curriculum or not that they were using and if it was an evidence-based curriculum. So, and then if they were basing their benchmarks and like the measurable benchmarks on that, as well as like training and stuff. So this one, I think, had the positive youth development as one of theirs and maybe trauma informed. But really it was just because some folks didn't even have a curriculum. So how do you know that what you're doing has been researched? And that was kind of my basic.
Ms. Simpson, do you want to weigh in on the question?
Bear with me just a second. And I might run out to the car for a second. I left my glasses at home and I at least have bifocals in my sunglasses, so I might run out and get them real quick.
And while she's looking through that, can I ask a question related to, I'm sorry to ask so many questions.
No, this is fine.
Do you have a copy of, there was a list of questions that you had for the,
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if it was program design or program evidence, but there were questions that I have it on my phone and I can pull it up, but those, there was a range of scores, the moderate, high, but then there were questions. And those questions had kind of a yes or no to give, to provide you the guidance for scoring.
I have it right here on my computer, but this is not wanting to cooperate with me.
And you provided it as a PDF, so I could probably pull it up really quickly. I know exactly which email it's on. And if you can, I'll put it.
She's got it.
You've been great. So for program evidence or for all of them in general?
I think it was for, it's the guiding questions.
Right, sorry, for which category? I have them all up.
Yeah, I have them all up as well. It was for all of them. I just wanted to make sure I had it somewhere where it was visible in case that same question that I posed was asked of me, because that's how I
Sure. Well, I have it pulled up. We can at any point kind of refer to it based on the discussion, the question that was posed. I am just going to go into the program evidence question. The questions were, does the applicant include detailed information on the program's evidence base, if applicable? Does the applicant include a coherent logic model illustrating the inputs, outputs, and short and long-term outcomes that result from implementing the program? And then does the applicant include a clear description of how participants successfully complete the program?
And so with that, I would like to increase my score.
Okay, which if you can, for the record, say my score was a blank and I'd like to increase it to a blank.
Okay, my score was a 13 and I would like to increase it to a 16.
Your change is noted.
Thank you.
And I am going to make that formal change. Spreadsheet.
Thank you.
Are there any additional questions on tab 15 or revisions? Based on the shift, the new total
Wait a
score,
minute, 15?
yeah, application, Big Brothers, Big Sisters.
Big Sisters.
Or you don't mean these two.
None, so on the score
Doesn't that
sheet,
make this-
yeah, and so it actually. says-
Yeah, but in my book, 15 is first two.
So we're talking about the proposal number.
Oh, my
Yeah.
apologies. I think that they're, okay, I'm not, ignore those proposal numbers. We're talking Big Brothers, Big Sisters.
Yeah. Ignoring these off.
These are how they should,
It's Robbie, it's 19, your book.
thank you. I think that they're like the.
Gotcha.
I remember last year.
Yeah, I remember discovering this before. There was a couple that got inverted. Okay. Yeah, Big Brothers, Big Sisters. So the new score is a total of 421. for an average score of an 84.2. So I'll just remind you, on your individual score sheet, Ms. Stevenson, since you made a revision, if you'll, on yours, it has your name on it, just cross through where you get, look.
Okay, and then initial.
Yeah, and it does not on the big one, but on your individual one.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, gotcha.
All right, now we will take up proposal Boys and Girls Club, which in my record book is have 16, but maybe not yours.
Okay.
Okay, so Boys and Girls Club, and we will welcome Ms. Ward to the conversation. And just as a reminder, like we were kind of working from this sheet, but if you make edits, I'll walk you through the process of any edits to make. So for Boys and Girls Club, the again, the average score was 459, the total score was 459 for an average score of 91.8. And any discussion? On any of the items for that. Seeing none, I assume no changes are warranted across for this one. Good. All right, we will finalize their scores of 459 with an average score of a 91.8. Now we will take up First Tee, which is, I think, Urban Tallahassee doing business as First Tee. So their total score was a 393.4 for an average score of a 78.68. Going across the board, they had an average score of a 12 for its organizational profiles, a 32 for program design, 14 for program evidence, and a 20 on their budget. I'll now open the floor up for discussion, questions on First Tee.
Well, I have a lot of questions about this program. I couldn't tell exactly what kind or how much mentoring there was as opposed to the other activities. And the golf and the information, it just wasn't clear. There was no information on the training process for mentors or how mentees are matched. To me, the logic model was very general. There were no specifics. I thought one of their line items was a little odd in that they budgeted $1,500 in case they needed additional insurance in addition to their liability insurance. So that wasn't explained either. They just, I think they were missing detail.
Thank you. Any additional comments?
I just wanted to add to that, one of the things that I noticed was that they were, there was a currently existing program, not mentoring, at the schools with this organization. And I noticed throughout the proposal that there was no mention from the perspective of community relationship. There was no mention of the engagement with the school other than the letters of recommendation. So beyond the letters of recommendation saying they had existed in that capacity, a programming capacity, there was nothing else that I could see that showed, hey, we've been here in this space working with these kids, and based off of this, we want to extend the relationship to a mentoring capacity. So that was one of the things that I noted. And then the other thing that I noted was that the population that's being served was implied. So of course, you know, if you know about different schools in the county, then you may know whether they're designated as Title I or whatever. And most of for this application, beyond the stating the name of the school, I wouldn't have known the population being served was a particular population. So I think that this is pointing back to Ms. Robbie's comment that the level of detail in the application, I think could have been a bit more to support reviewers and anybody else understanding why they want to serve this particular population and what their previous relationship was with the school to make them want to extend the services beyond what's already being provided.
And additionally, yeah, the only thing it said was the zip codes. That was it. So there was no description. The other thing that this program did that was, I didn't see anywhere else, but I know we're judging them individually, is that recruitment of the mentors is done only online. That's it. And that's what they just said, it's just done online. And that seemed a little thin for a recruitment program.
Any additional discussion on first T? Kind of hearing this discussion, does it influence you or encourage you to want to change the scores that you submitted? You are, so Tanya, you have the opportunity to do that based on the discussion, should you want to. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to change your scores. You can talk about every proposal and change every score. It's complete your latitude. It's not finalized until this meeting ends. If there's no additional comments or revisions, we will finalize first T with an overall score of the 393.4 for an average 78.68. And we will now take up the application from Girls to Divas. Their overall score was a 350 for an average score of 70. The organizational profile scored an average of an 11. Program design, a 29, program evidence, an 11, and the budget, a 19. We'll now open discussion on Girls to Divas.
This one, I remember that there just not being a lot of evidence-based trainings that they use for staff or for mentors or anything. And this was a hard one because, you know, living in Tallahassee, you know what a great program, everyone speaks to them, and it's, you know, just a wonderful part of our community, but not reflected in the application really. So that was a tough one, but hoping they put some more maybe training back into it and try again.
Yeah, I think for, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think for this one, I needed some clarification throughout the application for a few things as well. I also noticed that there was no evidence of mentor training beyond the monthly sharing of concerns and best practices. And so I understand that mentors will be meeting to have those conversations. But beyond that, the actual evidence-based training or training in general, I didn't see any evidence that it existed. The clarification that was needed was for in one section, and this was related to surveying at the end of the program. It was one of the questions reference was that the participants would provide comments or evidence on if they were better off. And I didn't know what better off meant. So one of my comments was what is meant by better off in the key questions that will be incorporated in the site visits. And then the clarification that was needed is that in one section, it states that group mentoring sessions are planned in addition to 60-minute monthly face-to-face mentor-mentee engagement. And then in another section, the frequency of those mentor-mentee interactions states that it would be 60-minute monthly meetings. And this was under the program, the overview of the program. And then it says at least one face-to-face under the length and frequency. So I know that sounds confusing, and that's why it was confusing to me. In one space, it said that there would be 60-minute monthly face-to-face meetings. And then in another section, it states that same 60 minutes, but then it says that there would be at least one face-to-face. And so I'm trying to understand if there is one face-to-face per month, right, with the mentee, in addition to the 60-minute monthly meeting that will occur, because there's also a list of workshops that will take place that allows the entire group to engage. So I just need clarification on how often the mentees will have interaction with the mentors in addition to the workshops that will take place for the entire group. There it goes. I had to get it together. Okay, so that's that. And then the very last thing is that the program has been in existence for 12 years. And so I echo that we all know the wonderful, or at least many of us know the wonderful things that this program does in the community. But my question that I noted here is, what is the program evidence that exists beyond what is provided? And what I meant by that is there was little provided in the proposal related to program evidence of the program existing over time. And if it has existed for 12 years, it would be really, really nice to have some strong proof of evidence of, the existence of the program, feedback from the participants and all of those things. It would be supportive of the wonderful work that visually, right, see in the community. Having that in the proposal would be very helpful.
Any additional comments? Oh, sorry.
First of all, I
There's a little part of me that wants to encourage you to like move over there, but like I want to encourage you to also talk to one another. Sorry.
concur with everything you said. It wasn't clear how much mentoring time. There's no training description. There's no, they said the matching is done by committee, but it didn't say what the committee consisted of, who it was, or their qualifications or anything about it. And if they've been doing this for 12 years, they should have a process for all this stuff, I think. The other thing, and it goes back to the data question, when you're trying to figure out what the impact of the program is. When it said they did not identify data to be collected, but they very carefully said in each area, the data collected to be collected may include, and they made no affirmative statements about what it would include. I had some questions on their budget because it wasn't, I think, as fleshed out as it might have been. Like $30,000 for a tire. And there was a dollar amount all in addition for polos, t-shirts for mentors and staff. And then $18,000 for tools and resources for promoting mental health. But didn't explain where that might come in or how it came to play or what it was. Mentors can reach out if they need anything, but there's no supervision or interaction with staff. The only supervision is that every 2 to 3 months, the staff person meets with each match. And that seemed a little sparse. No specifics for program evidence. The community to be served was not described.
And just adding that their organizational budget is very low currently. And so it's kind of like what comes first, the chicken or the egg. Would they be able to mentor more intently one-on-one if they had more funding? And so hoping that, if they do reapply to maybe write for what they would do with more funding to be able to provide that closer mentorship training, because it is hard to do that with a lot of volunteer staff and minimal budget. So Yeah.
I just wanted to add that I think that it's a great program, and it's also a product of when you have a grassroots organization that's focused solely on programming and having to do this type of office work. It's not a fair reflection on their ability to be a strong mentoring program. And there is a lot of data that supports that when you have minority organizations and or leaders who have not been trained or exposed in how to train and track their data, it may appear as if they are not able to properly administer a grant that can help them get to the next level because of a lack of exposure, not a lack of ability. And so I am just mindful of that because there is a lot of research that supports that. And that's why so many businesses that are minority owned are undercapitalized. And it has more to do with that than it does, to not have the social capital, to not have the relational capital, in addition to not having the financial capital in order to get things off the ground. And so to me, it's highly possible to have a 10-year program that's successful and not have data to prove it. And so if this consideration is not only for that strong nonprofit that has an infrastructure to have all the dots on the I and all the T's crossed, then I think that has to play into how we're scoring as well. And I thought that there were parameters in our guidelines that did allow for that. So that's why I stand by my support.
Thank you for this rich discussion. Based on this conversation, kind of your perceptions, do any of you want to adjust or shift your scoring?
If I shifted it, it would be lower. So I think I'll leave it alone.
Hearing none, we will finalize their score at the 350 with an average of 70. We'll now take up Girls on the Run. They had an overall score of a 383 with an average 76.6. You see an average of a 12 for their organizational profile, a 31 on program design, a 15 for program evidence, and a 19 on budget. We'll now open discussion on Girls on the Run. Yes, go ahead.
Well, they might have an interesting idea, but I think they're missing on the follow through because they're basically talking about 2 10-week sessions, which is 20 weeks or 5 months with a 14-month budget. And I'm not sure that's a good use of the funding to have that long of a budget and that short a time put into the actual mentoring. The other thing is this program had 8 mentees to 1 coach, which is a coach/mentor. They never really explained why a family member was part of this program. And I kind of wondered if there were going to be mentoring sessions, which they weren't exactly called mentoring sessions, they were called something else. Would it be more useful to the mentees to have a family there or to get some outside input from someone else into whatever the mentoring is going to consist of? I just had a question about that kind of structure. The recruiting is not done by them, but it's done by the school. They send some information to school, and the school distributes it to the parents and whomever else. There's no educational requirement for the program coordinator. They had a 5% retirement match for a staff member who made $75,000 a year, and it was $36,000. I think they made a mathematical error that it should have been about $3,600. And they should be more cognizant of how much money they're asking for. Or they're planning on giving a substantial requirement. They included $1,000 for translation. And I did recall that CSC was going to provide translation services. So I didn't know if that was a necessary expenditure. They also said there was not going to be any summer program 2023. And their proof that it worked was a survey. And that it didn't seem to be data-based as such, it was just a survey of the participants. And that seemed a little thin as well.
Thank you. Any other comments for Girls on the Run?
I had a comment concerning the length of time dedicated to evaluation and quality improvement. So that was my only comment, was looking at the total length of time of that the program would be funded, how much time was dedicated to the mentoring aspect of it, and then how much time was dedicated to the evaluation and quality improvement. And I could be wrong, but from what I've read, it looked like there was about a 2 to 3 month period of time that would be dedicated to the evaluation and quality improvement. And then, and I could be wrong, I'll look back through the application while we're talking. But then, of course, those 10-week periods for implementation of the program. And so that was my only concern, was that part of the programming could possibly be shortened to provide additional time for the implementation and or the mentoring part of the program. So that was my only comment.
I'll just kind of share that one of the things we did tell the applicants was that they could build in time for scaling, is kind of like how we talked about it, more program implementation, especially if they were starting a new program.
Mm-hmm.
The discussion or any conversation about how they would do their own evaluation services was, we did not set specific parameters or expectations on that in the application, but in their proposal, they could have written that in. But we did allow for scaling for implementation, whether it was kind of especially implementing a new program, but if they were expanding, maybe starting a new program at a different school, something like that, but that was built in on the front end. And the suggested length of time for that period was not to exceed 50% of their actual program duration. So to your point, if it's a 10-week program, their implementation period should not exceed 50% of a 10-week program. That was the only kind of guidance that we provided to all applicants.
And their program was actually 37% of the 14 months. That's all it was.
I like that they were research-based. I think they put a lot of their application about the proof, but it's, nationally, I think they've got a lot of edge because they've gotten other resources that have built it out. So I think we do have, we do get to leverage the national resources here in our community, which is exciting. And I like that they do work with their schools, because I think that helps with showing that the school has insight, and the school might know better than one organization that's in one spot. So I thought that was more of a strength. And then I like how much they put into training each person. They had different like whole curriculums that you had to do before you got to jump in. And they mentioned during their presentation, which I think I missed when I was reading through, the different ability levels that they, if you're just walking a little bit, you're still one of the girls with them. And I thought that was really cool. as someone who doesn't like to run, it's cool to know there's a place for me there too. And so I thought that it was a cool thing for our community that has so much background of proving that it's helpful.
I wanted to make another comment in relation to what you just mentioned. And I noted this from the beginning of the proposal that I appreciated that they extended the definition of run beyond just the physical aspect of running. Like it was running to your dream, running to, you know, all of these different things. And I really did appreciate that both from the presentation and from looking at the proposal. So there were, and I probably haven't mentioned enough about the wonderful things that I'm seeing in many of the applications of we're having conversation more just about concerns and things like that. But I did really appreciate in this application that definition, because for some people, myself, running would turn me on. And so when I see that it is extended beyond just the physical aspect of what they would be providing, that makes me you know, just appreciate what they bring to both the girls and to the schools and the community. So I just wanted to echo that.
You bring up a very important point that this conversation and discussion for each of them, it doesn't have to be deficit based. It can absolutely be strength based. It can be balanced. It could be both. You can ask each other questions like, hey, somebody scored at this. I'm really curious. Why did you do that? Or you scored at this, or I scored at this and I'm seeing this. So you can do this conversation is for all of that rich conversation to occur. We are recording, so chances are the applicants are listening or at some point will listen. So that's a great point that you illustrate. Sorry, back to Girls on the Run. Any additional comments?
Yeah, I would just agree. I really respect that we have a program here in town that is really research based, and so there's a lot of evidence, and so there's a lot of benefit that we aren't even able to see yet because of what we know has been proven with it. And so I think it's a real asset to have the strength of that, the national support that they get behind it. And I also just noted that it's a hefty ask for the request. And so there's a great opportunity to engage the community more to support it as well, monetarily.
Based on this discussion, does anybody want to shift their scores?
I think I want to increase my evidence-based one.
Okay. If you, for the record, can say I would like to take it from this number to this number.
And am I, which number am I? Am I number one? Or am I number 5?
No, if you're number 1 or number 4.
I am 4. Thank you. Because maybe I don't want to increase it. I'm looking at number 1.
I'd have to check. We purposely aggregated it that way. So looking at your score sheet, your personal score sheet, this side, just communicate it that way.
You're so good. Yeah, that's it. But yeah, so taking it from a 15, I'd like to get to a 17.
Okay.
I think originally I put 15 because in the application, they talked more about when I first read it, I was reading it as evidence that their program within Tallahassee is successful. Like out of this many kids happen to have positive outcomes. But I think I have 2 points more of an appreciation for the national research on this.
For the purposes, so that we can document on the right one, can you tell us what you gave them for your program design?
32.
Thank you. So let the record reflect the shift from 15 to 17. Any additional revisions for Girls on the Run?
Yeah, I think I would like it.
She said 15 to 17 under program evidence.
Oh, program evidence, I'm looking under the wrong one, sorry.
Ms. Stevenson?
I think I would like to increase my program evidence from 15 to 17 as well.
Well, that made it easy. Okay. Both of those changes have been noted. Any additional revisions? Okay. With the revisions, the new score for Girls on the Run is a 387 with an average score of a 77.4. We'll now take up the proposal from Lincoln Center Foundation. The Lincoln Center scored a 374 overall, which is an average of a 74.8, a 12 on their organizational profile, 30 for program design, a 13 for program evidence, and a 20 for their budget. Now open discussion on Lincoln Center Foundation. Was the boxing club for those remembering, right?
They started out really strong. Said they used boxing to teach self-control, to avoid aggressive behavior and increase core self-esteem and eliminate negative behavior and violence. And I thought, wow, this is really interesting. And so they said, but mentees don't have to participate in boxing. So that kind of defeated their whole purpose that they stated. And so I kind of, wasn't sure then what their whole mentoring was about. They had no qualifications for their assistant coaches who applied to be mentors. They're paying all their mentors $98,000, which I know is acceptable, but they were paying them all $25 an hour. And so what's the difference between qualifications between them, the assistants and the mentors? A little confusing. Now, under their logic model, their goals and objectives were listed as activity, and there were no outputs or outcomes. And so I thought their logic model was very weak. I also thought they were a little too generous when they gave $80 per mentee for lunch in the city.
I think it's such a cool outlet. Having permission to punch things is really helpful. Like that, and I can go look,
Absolutely.
there's a time and a place, and they made it, so it's great.
But I agree, but they don't, but their mentees don't have to do it. There's no, they didn't even say they encouraged it, they just said, not required.
We can all punch, just don't need to. But the location too, I love that it's right in the center of Frenchtown at the Lincoln Center. That's just like, if you're walking by, there's just so many kids can get to there just walking, not even having to take a bus to get there. So that's really cool. And there's like that community center right next to there, which has more younger kid oriented stuff. So it seems cool that this is for like teens right there. So I love that. And I think the part that was hard for me was that if I want the kid who's gonna need to punch things or has like an issue with potentially violence, if they've had it in the household, they're coming in there to like find it in a positive way. There was a lot of focus on punitive responses. I think there's specific comments about if a kid starts getting 4 grades, then they're out of here and they can't participate in boxing. And to me, it seems like that's the kid we would wrap our arms around even harder, is the one who's like not doing well. So just the idea of preparing kids for being removed from community for doing poorly is not something that mentoring seemed to go with their mission. And I think that part of the reason we got there as They don't really have social workers on their team or mental health or holistic approaches to it. So I think they're so close to it being just like a knockout program if they could just incorporate more evidence-based mental health and then maybe some of that punitive for good. So you come in type mindset that I read in there, both in the presentation. And then I agree about the logic model too, but I wonder if it's, if you don't have a bunch of social workers on your team, how often have you had to do a logic model? So the logic model seemed like it was all about the program. The program will do this, this, and this, but we really wanted to see in the logic model, 75% of youth will report higher report cards, which they spoke to, they just didn't put it in their logic model. So having that more reflective there, I think would help to do concrete benchmarks that we want to see. So cool idea, great location, totally needed, and just almost there.
I just wanted to add, just in general, and this is based off of the comment that you made regarding evidence being provided or not in relation to training that has been provided or not for different organizations. And I think one of the things that organizations can take into consideration is the qualitative feedback that they get, because for many of them, what I found is that they have tons of qualitative data that they have not considered, and it's good stuff, right? That they have not considered as evidence to provide support about how good their programs are doing, right? They may not be doing surveys, they may not be doing some of these other types of evidence-based things that we're looking for, but their participants are providing them with evidence that they are benefiting from their programs. And that is the type of thing that at least I would look for to say, you've been in existence this long and your kids are saying this about how they are benefiting from your program. And while, I see that you don't have this type of evidence, and I could, attribute that to not having the training or the funding, but then these other types of evidence that show up and show out in this way because of what you're doing for the participants can be used to leverage how well your program is doing. So I think that, if programs are listening, right, they can take that into account in the future to support strengthening their applications, because many of the applications are really, really good, but then they don't have that part of what is needed to strengthen the application, but they actually in reality do have it from the feedback and things that they're getting from some of their participants. So
And I will add to that because I did note that they've been around since 2008. And I agree, both qualitative and quantitative data is there. It's just not been aggregated. And there probably is a disconnect in how do you aggregate that so that it shows up into an application. So I agree, if participants are listening, that's an opportunity, because it's not a true reflection. The application is not a true reflection of what's happened since 2008. And then I also would agree that, it would be a great opportunity to get some mental health or social workers to just tweak some of the punitive to match what happens and what can help those kids who really do want to hit something and can now use this as an outlet.
Thanks for the great discussion. Based on this, does anybody want to submit any revisions to their scores?
I think I hesitate to do this, but I think I am going to revise my program evidence score. I currently have a 20 and I'm going to use that to a 16. And that's the only revision that I have.
I have made the record reflect that on the screen as well as in our document. Any additional revisions? That brings a new total for Lincoln Center Foundation to a 370 with an average of a 74. We'll now take up the Omega Lamplighters. Maybe Lamplighters had an overall score of a 467, average score of a 93.4. Their organizational profile average was a 14. Program design, a 37. The program evidence, a 19, and the budget, a 23. I'll now open discussion for the Omega Lamplighters.
Good program. I think it was, I mean, everything was very clear, they were very concise, they were very specific. I was, I think they put together an impressive RFI.
I agree. And I appreciated their presentation and the work that they're doing in the community. I noted a question both on my sheet here and in my book. For how many children and or youth do you anticipate serving exclusively with Leon funds? It said 0.
Believe it was a typo, but you're right.
And I noted that in my comments, I said, the true number is indicated elsewhere in the proposal and was mentioned during the presentation. So this has to be a mistake.
Yeah.
And I believe that the panel asked about the question during the interview, but I mean, I can't change what was submitted, but that's why it's so important to note why we give them the opportunity to do a presentation and have Q&A, as well as we love it when you include your comments in the score sheet.
Okay. That was mine.
And that number is on your larger sheet.
Right, it's on there and it's in the packet for the presentation. So I knew that I heard it multiple times elsewhere, but I highlighted it in yellow here and wrote a note and said, is this a mistake? So, okay, thank you.
Yeah, I agree. This was a very impressive and thoughtful presentation. And this is an instance where I think it's a direct reflection of the training of the one who was doing the presentation, where the training was able to reflect the actual status and outcomes of the organization. Just wanted to note that.
Based on this discussion, any revision to the scores submitted?
No, I want to add too that I appreciated during the discussion talking about positive masculinity and incorporating that, especially because we don't see a lot of guy focused stuff on here. It's really cool that they would speak to that too. So no revisions on mine. Great program.
Yeah, and to that, but also I noted the grief support, which is huge in a community where there's a lot of violence. So yeah, that was really a positive note.
Right, and we will finalize their score at a 467, 93.4. The next application we will take up is CIP Families for Florida. They had an overall score of a 440 with an average score of an 88, scoring a 12 on their organizational profiles, 36 for program design, 17 for program evidence, 23 for budget. We'll now open the discussion for CIP Families for Florida.
I looked at this as sort of a grassroots kind of a program. And so I probably judge that a little bit differently. I think that I have some reservations because they've done 25 families since 2017. And then they want to do 100 youth in 14 months. But if they have all the volunteers and family and friends and family coaches put together that they included in there, they've got a shot at doing it. So yeah, I recommended them and with my score.
I thought they had a good structure for their mentors and some accessible pipelines. I really compliment their focus on respite because it's often overlooked and so needed in families who are frequently in crisis. From personal experience, it's hard to find respite. And so I think that's important for the community to support. And, I do see an opportunity for recruitment for mentors that reflects a bit more diversity. But regardless, respite is huge and nobody else does it. So I think that would a real compliment to what they're wanting to do, to look at all the areas of support that are needed, not just for the children, but those who are really trying to help take care of them.
Any additional comments for Safe Families for Florida? Based on the discussion, does anybody want to submit any score revision?
I think I do have a question if anybody wants to speak to it. If my budget score was so low, and I'm wondering,
For Safe Families?
yeah, I'm just wondering why mine was so much lower if I missed something.
It's only $25,000 for one staff person.
Yeah,
And they seem, or they're reporting that they have all these things in place for different types of volunteers in the community, be they ministers and church members or families or friends, or and that they have a whole circle. So I think they
is the total they're requesting 34, or is that based on the first one? Is it 22 or 30?
it's 25,000.
25,000. And it's just to support the coordinator position.
I think I'm gonna change my score to the budget.
Okay.
I'm at 19 and I'm gonna go to 22.
Any additional revisions?
I'm actually lowering my score for the budget.
Sure.
I'm at 25, I'm going to 23.
Okay, and I believe you were.
Just canceled out my.
Yeah, I was thinking that's a wash.
And no, I want to say this, so I'm appreciating the conversation that's taking place and recognizing that based on our backgrounds and experiences and other things, that there are certain evaluation categories that we focus on. Like for someone here, program design and evidence might be everything. And then for someone else, the numbers, accounting and budget, right? And so this is a conversation. It's giving me more insight on what I should have considered as far as a range is concerned for the budget. So that's where my change.
You just met closer.
Right.
It's exactly the two. So like, y'all might have like kind of watched each other out almost at the 0.2 difference, but like, this is exactly why we want to have this, so that when we give these scores to our council members, they can be very confident that you have a rich discussion and meaningful debate about why you landed where you landed. So it's very nice when you see a process work exactly how it's supposed to. Sorry. Any additional revisions for Safe Families for Florida? Seeing none, this now brings the new total to 441 and the average an 88.2. Now we will take up our final proposal.
Do that one more time.
Sure.
41.
441 for an average of 88.2. And then we will take up our final proposal, Teenpreneur Foundation, which scored a 387 for an average of a 77.4. They received a 13 on their organizational profile, a 31 for program design, a 14 for program evidence, and a 19 for their budget. We'll now open discussion for Teenpreneur Foundation.
This one was unique. I don't think we saw one like it, where they're focusing on the business aspect of mentoring young people, which is cool. And needed, and how do you see a future if you don't see a way to that future? So that was very cool. I think where I stumbled in theirs is the mentor doesn't need to match their profession choice. And so if your goal is to help mentor them towards their career, or whatever it would be, then I would imagine that mentor really needs to link up, and I didn't see a reason why it didn't in the proposal, or when I asked the question when they were here, hoping they would like do it when we were here. And then also I think the amount per youth seemed a little high as well, given that it wasn't as hands-on constant. So it just seemed like the bang for the buck, the last lack of a better term, isn't there.
Additional comments? Feel bad, I was hoping somebody else would go first. They're doing 30 mentees. And I agree that their budget is extremely high. They're going to address youth violence with a focus on recidivism and truancy. And that's said at the beginning, but it's nowhere else in the entire RFA how they're going to do it, what they're going to address, or anything about it. I couldn't find anything else anywhere. But they're going to teach them how to make a business plan. And even though I believe that children are much more sophisticated and smart and do a lot of things younger these days, I'm not sure a 9 or a 10 or an 11-year-old needs a business plan. I agree this is, might be good for, high school kids who want to figure out what their goals are and do a business plan. I know they mention in there, or they could do a personal plan, but they didn't say anything else about it. And so I just doesn't say, by the way, who teaches the business plan. Bear with me on my glasses. I just think their budget is very high for what they're going to do. There's no one-on-one mentoring. They don't say what they're doing during their group sessions or how long they are. They have 2 different budget line items for staff, some for temporary staff, and some for regular staff. And it's substantial. They have instructional materials for $22,000. And then they have another $2,700 for additional workbooks and monitoring materials. But the $22,000 already includes the workbook, so I'm not sure if that's just a duplication or an error. They have no current budget. And the mentors include the paid staff that are being paid extra money for that, I believe that's what that was. Their outcomes were anecdotal. And I just think it's an incredible amount of money for what they're doing.
Additional comments on Teenpreneur?
I must have misunderstood, but I thought I did see in the application and in my notes that they do offer one-to-one mentoring. So if I did misunderstand that, it's someone can help me
I actually noted that they have one-on-one mentoring sessions 45 times a month. I have a note here that I put, and I'm trying to figure out where I got it from.
Well, I think it was from the presentation, and then down here it says, one as well as group mentoring offered in 1 hour a week sessions, either Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. So.
Put it here, and I don't know where I got it.
I'm sorry, I stand corrected. I'm sorry. It's 12 weekly sessions through one-on-one and group mentoring, but it didn't split out how much of. So there's 12 weekly sessions, but it doesn't say how many are one-on-one and how many are group.
I'm gonna drop my budget 2 points.
Teenpreneur, so is that a 21 to 19?
Yes. Here in my head. Gonna cancel it. I think so. I'm dropping my budget from 25 to 22.
Okay.
And I'm dropping my program evidence from 20 to 16.
Okay.
And my program design from 40 to 35.
All noted. Additional revisions? Or additional comments on Teenpreneur? Hearing none, the new score for Teenpreneur, the final score would be a 373. And the average is a 74.6. At this point, I would like to direct you to kind of online. It's also behind your head, but I'm going to say them out loud so that if you want to pull out your total, just so that you know what will the final sheet be that gets submitted to the council. For Big Brothers Big Sisters, 84.2. For Boys and Girls Club, 91.8. For the First T program, 78.68. For Girls to Divas, 70. For Girls on the Run, 77.4. For Lincoln Center Foundation, 74. For the Omega Lamplighters, 93.4. For Safe Families for Florida Alliance, 88.2. And for the Teenpreneur Foundation, 74.6. So I want to thank you for your time today. And before I turn it back over to Sika, I just want to remind you to please take your score sheet itself. Any revisions to scores that you made, how I've just scored it up, not this one, but your actual one that has your DFS on. I don't know why yours has yellow on it anyway. There we go. And just kind of cross through any revisions that you made. I do, Sika and I both kind of did master, so if you need to look at it just to make sure, initial all of them, read through the comments. Some people posed questions in their comments. You might have got those answers today, so maybe you want to delete something, or maybe you want to add something. Just make sure that what you turn in before you leave today is what you want on the final record. I know that Ms. Ravi asked to add additional comments. I said, absolutely, just make sure that you have them in
Can I ask a
handwriting.
question?
Yeah, sure. So we're about procedurally, sure.
Sorry, this is about Omega Lamplighters.
Oh,
Did you all figure out if they had 55 mentees or 100? Because in one place they said 55, in another place they had 100. I'm sorry, I was not looking at the sheet at the time. Could not quite get there.
I'm participants, mentees.
Well, I think
Are you saying participants or mentees? Oh, participants are mentees, not mentors. I don't have the answer to that, but I do remember during the presentation, them stating they had a set number and we're adding to that number for the next round.
I think they have currently 55 in these areas. They were going to 100. But I don't know if that's 100 additional or reaching 100.
Well, that's what I was trying to figure out.
See, I have here a note that says 96 active this summer, additional 85.
That's perfect.
Yeah, that's what I have in my notes too. 96 annual.
That's additional 85.
So closer to 100, yeah. Okay.
That's the 236, yeah.
Okay, so
Because of the rounds. So their goal is to serve uniquely is 236 kids over the course of the 14 weeks.
Yeah.
okay, all right. Thank you very much.
That is reflected, just so you know, it's reflected on this sheet that has the green, right there.
Oh, I have too many papers.
Number proposed.
Yeah, that's good. Breaks it down with the cost of the child.
Because it had to do with first semester.
Cool. Okay, all right, so then I can cross that out. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Cool.
Okay, so back to the score sheets. Before you leave, sign it, make sure that it is final. We will then take all of that, feed it into the draft that we were sharing online. And then it will be posted later on this evening and might be tomorrow morning. It will get posted. And then that is what will be included in the packet directly to the council. The meeting is on June 15th, which is a Thursday in this room. You are invited to participate. Yes, ma'am.
Can we reopen something?
Sure, we haven't convened yet, so yes.
I wanted to mention something.
Can you tell us what application?
That was on Teenpreneur,
Okay,
and they gave their presentation. The gentleman said there would be no one-on-one mentoring for the fall semester. And that bothered me because then there's only, and there's one in the summer, so it's just spring and fall that this is paying for. They're having weekly entrepreneurial coaching, mentorship training in the spring and fall. But the gentleman made the comment that everyone's too busy in the fall. So there's not going to be any one-on-one mentoring in the fall. And I don't know, given the amount, the amount of their budget for 2 semesters makes it even more expensive.
based on this additional comment, would anyone like to submit an additional revision on their score? Hearing none, then we'll maintain the revised score of 74.6. So on your individual score sheet, make sure that all the changes that you noted are there. Any comments that you want to be incorporated into that final, that they're noted. If it's in there now, you don't have to approve it or check it. Just if you want something crossed out or something additional added, make sure that's reflected on your sheet and that you sign it with your signature next to your name.
I just wanted to get some clarification of what Ms. Robbie is asking. So Ms. Robbie, you're saying that during their presentation, they said they would not provide mentoring in the fall?
He actually did. He kind of laughed. He said, everybody's too busy in the fall with football, so there won't be any one-on-one mentoring in the fall semester.
And I'm only asking because I'm looking at the overview of the proposed program.
I know, and that was what he said when they did their presentation. He did
Okay.
the presentation.
Is that one-on-one or is that group? They're only gonna do group in
One-on-one.
the fall.
Because here it says during spring and fall, we will conduct a series of 12 weekly entrepreneurial coaching, mentoring, training sessions through one-on-one and group mentoring while meeting a minimum 1 hour per week on Tuesday, Thursdays, Fridays, excluding major holidays.
And that's Tuesday, Thursdays, or Fridays. It's one day. And it's, but then when he does.
This conflicts with what was said during
Well,
the
he said
presentation.
afterwards, now, he said, yeah, none for the fall.
How many are they funding together? Do we know?
So it's not a program,
No.
no, oh,
30?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you meant how many mentees, I'm sorry.
did you mean the council?
Yeah, is it a set amount?
Yeah, so if you look on your,
Oh, you guys.
if you look on your form, you will see under mentoring that the total allocation is $1 million and the total request is 1.7, almost 1.8 million.
Okay.
And so during this process that you all graciously helped to do, your rankings will be provided, not your rankings, your scores and comments will be provided to the council. And because this is an RFA, they will make the decision how they distribute that $1 million. And
Might
so
pop
we
it all up.
will provide it to them in a, in number order, we'll give it to them in percentage order, we'll give it to them in cost per kit, whatever they ask us to do. And then they will make that decision on how they fund $2 million worth of recorded requests with $1 million. Then they also have the decision to increase the allocation as well, if they'd like to do that.
We have the easy part.
Well, I will go on record as saying RFAs inherently are easier because you literally are evaluating and commenting. You do not have to then get into making a funding recommendation. However, because you all have done such a wonderful job with the RFA, please do not be surprised if we come back and promote you to the next RFP. So with that, before we get to allowing you each to give your comments, we want to remind you that we are still in the quiet period, which began when the RFA was issued and will end once the council makes a decision and we get to an intent to award. So you still should not be conversing with each other. You still should not have to worry about any of the applicants speaking with you. If they have questions or if they find you, direct them to Holly of the procurement.
What's the date? What's the date that?
June 15th.
June.
June 15th at 4 o'clock. We will be in this room for our council meeting, and it's going to be a long one. But it will be online. All things being equal, it will be streamed online, and you can feel free to tune in if you do not want to be here in person. So I would like to give you all an opportunity if you have any closing comments. We'll start with Brianne.
Yeah, so I do have a closing comment. It's something that I've been thinking about quite a bit while we've been having discussion. And it's just related to the different organizations, just I guess benefiting from the experiences and strengths of each other. I don't know how much they interact with each other, if at all. But what I recognize is that some of the organizations have strengths in providing evidence. The program evidence that was required for this, and in some of the other areas. And so I think some people mentioned how the mental health component and or the need to have engagement of social workers, right? And I can think specifically about one organization that might not have had as much program evidence as we would have wanted, but their background in social work and mental health is through the roof. And I know that for sure. So I'm just thinking of the ability for the organizations to engage with each other and maybe, find ways to benefit from the strengths of each other.
So I'll just do a quick response. So as this is our second real third funding application, one of the messages or one of the purposes of the council is to help organizations really hone in on their strengths, be sure that they're staying true to their mission and looking at how they can collaborate. So in future procurements, we will be looking at how we build that into the procurement so that we have organizations with their strengths partnering to provide services. For example, if you have a mental health organization, case management organization, that's what they do, could partner with an activities organization. And by partnering together, you now have the activities piece and the case management, mental health piece. So we will get there. And part of that, I think, is just continuing to expose our providers to each other and shifting the paradigm in the community so that it's not one of these where you're fighting for, but actually collaborating with. So your point is definitely.
And I wanted to add to that, I say that from the perspective of being in higher education, where I have students that are applying for grants, fellowships, and awards. And typically, you know, from a director position, we bring them content and present it to them. But we find that when they work together as peers, they seem to be much more receptive to how they share information and how they use that information to grow. And so I'm thinking of it from that perspective as peers, that, you know, even though they're competing to some degree for the funds, there's this level of sharing and understanding that no matter how much training you provide at this level, that it just looks different when it comes from them as peers. So.
Can I add one?
Yes.
In addition to in the future, the building out the provider network and awarding collaboration, we're going to have another funding opportunity for our small organizations. I've heard grassroots said a couple of times. I know that means different things to different people. So we have CIPs.
Yes.
So the small investments for program success, it designs, it's a small amount of money. The cap is $15,000 that they can ask for. But what it does is for small organizations, it's a very specific ask. So maybe I'm pitching an idea for future applicants potentially, is that I've heard a lot of the questions. They've been in operation for all of these years, but they don't have the data, both quantitative and qualitative, to show what they do. One could make the argument that under a CIPS program that they could use a one-time allocation to help gather that information to show the evidence of their program services. Because what I also heard you say, Ms. Ward, was if they're a grassroots organization and they're doing the services, do they have the time to take all this great data that they probably have sitting in a box somewhere, right? Or on a database, maybe if they, did it on a computer, and what do they do with that? So there are going to be other opportunities, or maybe it is training. Man, I really wish that we had the curriculum to send all of our mentors through a particular training. And maybe that's a one-time cost. That's a one line item thing, but those are things that they might be able to leverage an upcoming funding opportunity for. That should be open July 1.
Can I make one last comment? This is to all of the organizations that submitted proposals. I just want to give kudos to all of them for one, having the courage to continue to do this much needed work in the community, and then just being bold enough to put themselves out there in this capacity of presenting and submitting a proposal to be reviewed by so many people and having feedback provided. Just want them to know, if they're watching or not, that we appreciate the work that they do in the community, and just want to give kudos to them for continuing to do that work.
I like that. So kudos to them, and also to reviewers. I feel like this was a great job. And then CSC, thanks for taking care of us and setting this up so well. Yeah, it was great. We enjoyed it. I have two things to one. Potentially maybe some matchmaking that can happen. I don't know if you all do that, but the Big Brothers Big Sisters said that they can't find Black males who will mentor, and then Omegas, they spoke how their folks, when they graduate, they become mentors, and that seems like a really cool keeping the community together partnership that could be awesome. And then the Teenpreneur, don't say that, with your partnership with Any, it just seems like a really cool fit there, that incubator for young folks. And then to your point, when you're speaking about like trainings, specifically for evidence-based, I feel like that was something where people know how to do this. They know how to be evidence-based, but maybe they don't have the language to use it or haven't, or just don't subscribe to the language, whatever it might be. But there was a really cool program I was a part of specifically for trans youth. It was like a national program where all these groups were awarded and they said, well, we only want to be trained by other trans-led organizations. And it's like, okay, well, there's really not that many who are established with all these things. So they did something where each month a different group presented what evidence-based practice they wanted everyone in the community to know about. And so it was cool to see it through your eyes of like, why do you care this much about positive masculinity? And that way they were the ones who did all the training and you didn't have to. And it was from their point of view. And then it really created an awesome network and cut through some silos. And so that might be something, because I'd love to hear what Girls to Divas, most important evidence-based thing that they want all of us to know about incorporated into our program. So I think it'd be cool for us, and then really tighten that weave of the fabric in our services.
Well, I think this is a fantastic process. I appreciate the work of CSC and you are providing support and all the future plans that are leading towards making sure that organizations are able to maximize their benefit to the community. And so my hat's off to you all, and appreciation, and also respect and appreciation to the organizations. As you mentioned, it's a tough job to put yourself out there and put all the work into it. And so I just want to echo that so they can hear it again. Yes, I'm being redundant, but it's for a purpose that you need to know. It was really good work, very impressive applications. The work that you're doing is needed. Don't stop. And thank you.
I have a couple suggestions for next time. One is that the submitters provide their current budget and number of participants for the prior year. Another is, don't use one title of a position on the org chart and another name in the narrative or in the budget. It's hard to reconcile. If there's more than one category of mentees, what percent of participants do they expect to see in each one? Because there were some that had different areas of mentees, but they didn't say where they expected them to be. And I guess it wouldn't be bad also to show where that money difference is to what the budget's being used for. And also, how many hours per week do they expect to spend with their mentees? Everybody just put greater than one because that was the minimum. It would be helpful if they could give a more suggested answer. And then there's another one, and that's the qualifications of the mentors. In one of these programs, I forgot to mention it. It said the program manager and the person that did the matching, both the only requirement for them was a high school education. So if they don't have any experience working in social services, or if they don't have any experience working with youth, if they don't have any experience, I mean, I'm not sure if it would just be tossed them in a pile and pulled out or what they would do. So those are just my suggestions for next time.
Thank you. So we appreciate all that. You probably thought us taking note, so that we can shore up and improve the process. I think the scores definitely showed the effort that the applicants put into the applications. So the last thing I will say is, to the point of the work that they put in, those applications and programs that are not funded will be invited to participate in our community of practice. And that is a capacity building relationship that CSC has with UPHS, and they take cohorts from each application cycle of programs that were not funded and go through with them what their applications may have lacked, the information that you all have provided, their business practices, all of those things that go into developing a very good program that should, it is voluntary, but should help them stand a better chance of getting funded in the future. So as part of our mission, it's not just about, yay, you made it, no, you didn't, but rather, great, you made it, but let's see if there's something that we can do to help build those who did not make it. And it's for selfish reasons. We want better organizations and applications, but also we want to help these organizations. And we're actually, I think, moving our terminology away from grassroots and into emerging. We had that conversation the other day, but we want them to emerge into these programs that make them top contenders for additional funding from other sources, because we have this finite amount of money, and trying to spread that not across the board, but in ways that it's gonna fund the outcomes we want. So with that, we appreciate your service. I always say, tell your friends, tell your families, tell your spouses, your significant others, we need evaluators. And so as we move into our next application processes, which will be this fall, we would love to have more evaluators. So please, please, please tell them of your experience and encourage them to serve, because it is their money that we are trying to get out in the community. So with that, we will adjourn at